Yeah.
Lusawu.
Tēnā koe te manga o te whare. It's my pleasure to speak in this, the first reading of the Electronic Interactions Reform Bill. I wasn't expecting to speak on the bill, so I've done a little bit of research so that I could understand what this bill is actually trying to achieve. So this is an omnibus bill to amend more than one act, and it may be introduced under Standing Order 263A, because it's dealing with interrelated topics that can be regarded as implementing a single broad policy. And so what is that single broad policy? Well, that single broad policy is part of the ongoing information management and digital transformation work, or as I like to think of it, how we use technology to deliver public services to New Zealanders. And I guess looking at the merits of this piece of legislation, I managed to find a Deloitte's Public Sector Research Group report, which was published in October 2015, and it's titled "The Journey to Government's Digital Transformation." And this survey examined digital technology's ability to fundamentally transform the way public sector organisations operate and deliver services to citizens. It was conducted and included participants of over 1,200 government departments from 70 countries, and the key global findings were twofold. The first was that approximately 75% of respondents indicated their digital technologies are disrupting the public sector, and 96% said the impact was significant. And secondly, that nearly 70% of these public sector officials said that they were behind the private sector. So they identified this huge technological divide. Why does it matter? Actually, from research and modelling in Australia, it matters a lot. So there was a cost-benefit analysis by Deloitte's Access Economics report titled "Digital Government Transformation, Unlocking the Benefits of Digitising Customer Transactions." And what they highlighted in this particular report, that the reduction in transaction costs by traditional channels had the ability over a 10-year period to reduce costs by 20%. And it also increased government productivity and efficiency to the tune of, and this is quite staggering, but $17.9 billion. And the other savings that they anticipated was a further $8.7 billion in convenience and out-of-pocket costs to citizens. And so when you think about the merits of this piece of legislation, actually I think that speaks for itself. The ICT and transitional costs were estimated at $6.1 billion. So if you look at the cost-benefit analysis, they are going to save $20.6 billion, and it's going to cost them $6.1 billion. So that's a 4.36% or ratio savings to one costs. And so I think really the merit of this piece of legislation lies in that research. I couldn't find the New Zealand specific research, but actually I'm sure that the officials will be able to provide that advice in due course. I also looked at the departmental disclosure statement, and the relevance to this piece of legislation on page 6 is to 163,000 New Zealand citizens. That's how many transactions transactions annually to be completed online. So actually, I think the scope of the transactions, if you, I don't know how many they anticipate, but if that's how many currently use those online services, if you think about making the technology more accessible to the entire country, which was my colleague David Shearer's point, actually I think the benefit to New Zealand citizens are going to be huge. It's incumbent upon me, given this isn't really my area of expertise, but it is of my colleague Claire Curran, who is our spokesperson for Open Government. And I wanted to communicate some of the messages that she thought was really relevant to this piece of legislation. So we obviously are supporting the legislation to Select Committee, but there are questions around the amendments, and specifically to the Births, Deaths and Marriages and Relationship Registration Act changes. And they are regarding the electronic verification, which currently requires statutory declaration documentation. and why. For her, and I think for other members of the House, it was actually within the context of the Philip Smith issue. And as we know, there was an inquiry into how Philip Smith, who was on temporary release from Spring Hill Prison in the Waikato, could obtain a passport. And so what we want to, and I'm signalling this to the government, what we want to be reassured about is that any changes and use of technology isn't going to create an opportunity for someone else in Philip Smith's situation to be able to obtain a passport because we've enabled them through technology to do so. So I'm highlighting it because I think it will be one of the issues that will come up, and I'm sure there are ways and means, and we have the officials who will be able to answer those questions on our behalf. But other than that, I don't really have much more to contribute. I think that the Select Committee process is always an incredibly robust one. We get submissions from people who understand not only that technology, but will highlight some of the, the challenges in the system if we remove statutory obligations in terms of requiring, for example, people to verify people's identity. But I'm convinced that the Select Committee process and the membership of the Government Administration Select Committee have the skills and expertise to identify any challenges and to provide amendments that this House, I'm sure, will recognise. So I commend the bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.